The Denver Nuggets are heading to the NBA Finals for the first time in their 47-year NBA history, and it completes a journey that I think it's safe to say not everyone thought might happen. But from the days of Larry Brown in the 70s to Alex English and Doug Moe in the 80s to Dikembe Mutombo and the big upset in the 90s to the Carmelo Anthony-dominated 2000s, we are finally here, nearly half a century later, and Tom Green joins us now. And Tom, I don't want to date you too much, but you've covered a lot of those years.
Yeah.
Did you think, honestly, that we'd be here?
Sure, but I never knew how it would happen. You would think over the course of 40-plus years the Nuggets would have won a championship. How they went about doing it, though, is what's fascinating to me. You know, getting this opportunity because, you know, they've had chances to draft and grow and do all those things, but I think via free agency, as so many players move in the NBA now, Denver was not a destination. So when you draft the best player in the world with the 41st pick, that's a little bit of good luck, and that's the Nikola Jokic story, and that's why we are here where we are today.
And I guess starting things off with Nikola Jokic, I mean, is it safe to say he's the best player to play here in Denver?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I think so, but I wouldn't count on my own expertise as much because if you go way back, the absolute prime of David Thompson might have been the most talented player ever to wear the uniform, but he was a little bit like a nova, burned brightly and then went away quickly. But when Dan Issel's a buddy of mine, and when he says there's no question that Nikola Jokic is the best player ever to wear a Nugget uniform, the two MVPs speak for themselves. The Nuggets have never had an NBA MVP. Spencer Haywood in one season with the Denver Rockets was the ABA MVP and the Rookie of the Year, but he was here for 1 year and gone.
Okay, so I guess looking back on all those years, 40-plus years, Denver Nuggets history, I guess obviously this team makes the championship, so in that regard, they're clearly the best team in Nuggets history. But in terms of overall talent, how this team is overall, would you say that the best Nuggets team you've seen?
Hard to say. There was two ABA teams. That one of them won 65 games in a season in 74-75 for Larry Brown, but they didn't get to the ABA Finals. The next year, they did get to the last ABA Finals before losing to Dr. J and the Nets in the next season. So those might have been the best teams. Of course, there were the other four teams that got to the Western Conference Finals. But outside of the year they played Seattle in 1978, the three matchups with the Lakers always had the ace, you know, whether it was Kobe or LeBron or way back when it was Kareem and Magic. Those, as good as the Nuggets teams were to get there, they were good enough to win championships, but they were playing Hall of Famers, I mean, legendary figures at the end and couldn't quite get over the hump. This team certainly has been very impressive in not only getting to the finals, but they look like a championship team for sure.
Is it Nikola Jokic? Is he the difference, or is it the collective? You factor in Michael Malone, his long tenure here in Denver, some of the signed pieces, more than signed pieces, Jamal Murray, Aaron Gordon, MPJ, amongst the others. What do you think was different about this team that put them over the top?
I think the key for the Nuggets is all those guys you mentioned are contributing at a high rate. But it's because the best player on their team wants everyone to contribute. Normally, when you think of the best player on a team, you think of a ball-dominant player, a guy who needs the ball, will take all the shots that matter down the stretch. And, you know, when you watch Jokic play, everyone's active because they know if they move, if they cut, he'll see them. Even if he's not looking at them, he'll see them. He'll make the right play. And sometimes the right play is to shoot it. But I think the way he plays and the way Michael Malone has orchestrated things, but the real maestro is Jokic, and he's created space for all of these players to play as well as they can. And then, you know, you look at the talent of some of those guys, you know, lottery picks. Aaron Gordon, a lottery pick. Jamal Murray, a lottery pick. You know, Michael Porter Jr. certainly would have been a lottery pick. And, you know, you go through the lineup and you go, these are really good players, but they are a tremendous collective. And that's because of their best player.
Certainly an unusual player, as you mentioned at that. Speaking of which, Carmelo Anthony was the Nuggets' best player for, 10 years, from 2003 to 2011, when he left under somewhat tumultuous terms. He demanded a trade. He went to the New York Knicks in February of 2011. He retired, announced his retirement this week after a 19-year career. What would you say should be his legacy here in Denver.
His legacy will soften over time, but for most Nugget fans of that era, it was a bitter departure. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't as though, Carmelo was delivering titles. And Carmelo, again, you talk about a ball-dominant player. He needed the ball, and he was going to take all the shots that mattered and things like that. But I think people will soften with time and see, Carmelo through a kinder light than they do now. The fact that another guy wears his number and is writing all the records and is, possibly writing a championship legacy, the concept of the number 15 hanging in the rafters and how they might share or do that sounds great outside of Colorado. Mm. But I think fans who were here for Carmelo's departure and are here now for the present brilliance that is Jokic, I don't think they see that number as a shared number. And I think they see the Joker as the only 15 in town. And Tebow, of course.
And Tebow. I was going to say Tebow as well. Yeah. One thing that strikes me when it comes to the Carmelo discussion, though, is that I grew up with the late 90s Nuggets teams that were, frankly, terrible.
Right.
I think about those.
That's how they got the draft so high.
And they got the draft so high. They get that number 3 overall pick in 2003. They take Carmelo, and boom, that franchise turns around. And yes, they didn't make it to the finals, obviously, like now, but they were a perennial playoff team. And they continued that after. I mean, they got so many assets in the Carmelo trade. They were able to stay competitive. Got Danilo Gallinari, who led them a couple seasons. To me, just transparently, it seems like we should still... Yeah, he forced his way out of town, but he stayed here for 8 years and did a lot for this franchise.
The fact that they made a good trade was not because of Carmelo's generosity. It's Carmelo put him in a box. He said, I'm going to be traded, and it's got to be to New York. That makes it harder to make the deal. The very last piece of that trade to fall, though, was the draft pick that the Nuggets used to take Jamal Murray. So thank you very much for that.
Nice work.
Yeah, that's worked out pretty well. And that happened, I think, 5 years after the trade itself, when that final piece of the trade fell into place, and boy, did it.
I guess from a broad perspective, we all know this is a Broncos town first and foremost, has been for a long time. The Nuggets making the NBA Finals for the first time, and obviously the best basketball player on the planet, as you said. How does this run and this team perhaps alter the Denver sports landscape? Is it too early to say, or how do you think it could?
Well, it definitely puts the Nuggets in a place where they've sort of been. I mean, they've never been able to ascend to the very top of the Denver sports radar because it's been a Broncos town. The Broncos have created a lot of space at the top with their post-Peyton Manning era, certainly underwhelming. The Avalanche have taken a lot of the oxygen out of the room with their championship run of a year ago. This Nugget team, though, has such a long legacy, much longer than the Avs, and it's not as long as the Broncos, but people love the Nuggets in this town. They always have. There have been many years, many long lulls where this team has been hard to love. This is the best of times, and you have the long-term fan who's always wanted the best for the Nuggets, and the bandwagon now is the biggest it's ever been. And should they deliver this championship, and we're good at parades now, it'd be a spectacular show of Nugget love, and hopefully it comes true.
Talk to me about that legacy, that perspective, because you mentioned that fans have been kind of itching for this. Nuggets have been in the NBA here since 1976, as we mentioned off the top. There is a kind of a loyal, hardcore fan base that's been around for a long time, right?
Yeah, and they've been tested. There have been times when Carl Scheer was running the team when I got here. I mean, they didn't have two nickels to rub together, and they would have to make decisions based on how to financially get through the next season. And they had one ownership group, Bino and Lee, that was a mess. And then Ascent came in, and then that's when the Avs happened, and that's when everything started to turn. And now with Kroenke Sports, of course, being so successful in other venues, football and hockey as well, there's no question about whether you can afford to make the right decision now, and that strength of ownership has paid off. But still, it's driving down the road and someone throws a winning lottery ticket in your window when you take the MVP with the 41st pick. I mean, that's not great management. That's not great ownership. That's just great luck. And what you do with it, that's great management. That's great coaching. How do you build around it? How do you make Nikola Jokic from a guy nobody even knows coming out of Serbia into the MVP. Most of that probably belongs to Nikola Jokic. He did the most of it. But there are other aspects of it. You know, when you look at the NBA MVP through history, I think the lowest drafted player ever to win an MVP was Steve Nash at 15. And there are a couple guys who've made it out of the teens, like Kobe, believe it or not, was drafted in the teens and things like that. But 41st, I mean, nobody saw it. Nobody saw the magic that is Nikola Jokic. And thank you very much. Thank you, whoever made that work and made it, happen here in Denver. Thank you.
And by the way, the Nuggets didn't see it because he was their third pick, I believe.
Yeah, no, it wasn't as though they had this prescience that no one else did, and they saw the genius of Jokic from that far away. They too were lucky, to say the least, and other teams, will always wonder, what if?
Yeah.
What if?
Absolutely. I mean, I think about it every time I go to Ball Arena to go watch the Nuggets, and that we have the privilege and the opportunity to watch the best basketball player on the planet playing right here, right down the road, and now they're going to be playing for an NBA Finals for the first time.
Yeah, the way he carries himself as far as his teammates, both on the court, sharing the basketball, and off the court, his humility and everything about him rings true. There was a part earlier in his career when he had a bit of a temper. He'd be upset at calls not being made, and you'd see him get into trouble with players or referees where he'd get agitated. And clearly he has either matured or chosen to become this even-keel rock that lives in the middle, not only of his team, but the other team's got to deal with him. And nobody's yet figured out how to deal with him. He's a total problem for anybody, whether it's Miami or Boston, as he's already been for the Lakers and the Suns and the T-Wolves.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Any final thoughts about the Nuggets, what this means for this town?
Well, I can just say is, having seen, for me here in person more than 40 seasons of Nuggets basketball, this is the magic that sports can offer. And you don't always get to see it, but it's one of those things where when you watch the U.S. Olympic hockey team beat Russia, or when you watch some terrific upset in any event, that anything's possible. And for Nugget fans who may have thought this will never happen, this is the time. And hopefully this is the place and this is the month when the Nuggets finally get to get over the top.
My Antonio McDyess Youth Large
Yeah.
looms somewhere in my closet, and if I could tell 8-year-old Chris back then that this was going to be the day.
One day. It'll be a long wait, young Chris, but it will in fact happen.
You have to wait a quarter century, but we'll get there. But Tom, thank you for your insight. I know you've seen so many of these seasons, so thanks for taking the time to educate us a little bit about what this means.
It's great to talk about it in the good times. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thanks, Tom.